hope you're ready for a book haul. Oh, I'm gonna put this down, okay. Wow, right. As you can already probably tell, I am here today for a book haul. I've got my weightlifting exercises in for the week, so let's just dive straight in and talk about all of the exciting new books I have in my home. As always, all of the books I mention in this video will be linked in the description box down below, and whilst you're down there you may as well click that little bell button which will give you notifications whenever I upload new videos and make sure you don't miss any if that's something you're interested in. But without further ado, let's get into the books. But where to start is the question. Let's go for the books I picked up on National Bookshop Day here in the UK. So Lauren from Lauren Wade Reads and I went on a book crawl around London, visiting our favourite indie bookshops and picking up some books together. We both had some book vouchers that were kindly given to us by Books Are My Bag, which I'm always incredibly grateful for. So I spent those and a little bit of my own money on 3 books for myself, so I will share them with you. The first one I picked up in Gaze the Word, which is an indie bookshop in London that specialises in LGBTQ+ literature, non-fiction and fiction, and this is Audre Lorde's autobiography. It's called Zami, A New Spelling of My Name, a biomythography. I'm not actually sure where the word a biomythography comes from, but I'm sure it will be explained in this book and I'm very interested. I'm pretty sure that Audre Lorde was one of the first people to also coin the term intersectionality, so she is a very interesting, quite academic thinker who was also a black lesbian warrior mother poet is how she describes herself, I think. She has actually sadly passed away. She died in the 90s from cancer, but I've read some of her essays and poetry in the past and really enjoyed it, so I thought it would be really interesting to read about her life growing up, how she became the woman that she was, her experiences presumably coming out, her experiences with racism, her experiences as a mother, which are all things that come up in her essays, but a linear narrative would be nice, so I'm excited for this. I then picked up myself 2 fantasy books from Forbidden Planet. The first one is Dreamer's Pool by Juliet Marillier. This I picked up not because I don't have enough Juliet Marillier in my house already. I'm currently reading my 6th Juliet Marillier book of this year. If you have been living under a rock or / not watching my videos this year, you might not know that she has become one of my favourite fantasy authors. But when we went in Forbidden Planet, Laura and I noticed that there was 2 copies of this one on the bookshelf. It is the first in her Blackthorn and Grimm series, and I've basically just harangued Lauren into picking up a Juliet Marillier, and we're going to read it together in November, and I'm super excited to buddy read a Juliet Marillier with another person because she's somebody I just want to talk about all the time, but I've not got enough people in real life who want to talk about her too, so hopefully Lauren doesn't hate this. Hopefully I don't hate it either. Hopefully this lives up to the rest of her books. And then I also picked this one up. This one was reduced. It's Patricia A. McKillip's Odd Magic. I have read 2 Patricia A. McKillip's books this year and really enjoyed them. She's a beautiful writer, very traditional fantasy, very magical, and I love these kind of cheesy, old-fashioned, intricately designed fantasy covers, like love them. And I just picked this one up because it was reduced. I didn't really know what it was about and I knew that I liked the author. So all it says in the back is, a young gardener tends the grounds at school for wizards and grows a new awareness of a powerful gift. But now on to some books I was sent by publishers. The first one is The Seafarer's Kiss by Julie Ember. This is published by Duet, an imprint of Interlude Press, and it is a queer retelling of The Little Mermaid, where the Little Mermaid falls in love with another woman, although I imagine a human woman, given the front cover and what I know about The Little Mermaid. So that's all I need to know really to go into this one incredibly excited. From the back it doesn't sound like a straightforward Little Mermaid retelling, however, where the prince has been replaced by a princess and it's very, you know, to the book. I think it's more loosely inspired by that, and it's more of like a mermaid folktale fantasy story with a mermaid falling in love with a human, and some attempts to keep her away from the woman she loves by her betrothed merman, perhaps. So I'm super intrigued by this. I was also sent a copy of The Corset by Laura Purcell by Raven Books. This is a book that I'm so excited to read, and I definitely think this is the perfect time to read it. It just came out, perhaps because it's a sort of autumnal season and people are reading more kind of gothic spooky books, which I'm definitely up for, and I've heard a lot of good things about Laura Purcell's other book, which I haven't read, but again, like I said, lots of good things. This one is about Dorothea and Ruth. Prisoner, visitor and prisoner, powerful and powerless. Dorothea, true love, is young, wealthy and beautiful. Ruth Butterham is young, poor and awaiting trial for murder. So it's about one character who's doing sort of charitable work. This is a historical setting by visiting prisoners in prison, and she meets this young woman who has been accused of murder, and she learns about her dark past. I was also sent a copy of The Secret Barrister by Anonymous, Stories of the Law and How It's Broken. This one's published by Pan Macmillan, and it is, as the title suggests, the accounts of a barrister working in the English legal system, the behind the scenes about where the law fails the people, how things can go wrong, what it's like working in this world, and presumably a bit of a tell-all given that it's been written anonymously. And again, I've heard really good things about this one, so I'm very interested in it. Non-fiction, if that wasn't clear. On the topic of non-fiction I was sent by publishers, I also have a copy of Bloody Brilliant Women: The Pioneers, Revolutionaries and Geniuses Your History Teacher Forgot to Mention by Cathy Newman. So this is a book all about women, historical women, whether they be scientists or activists, that were not covered in your standard history curriculum, which doesn't seem difficult because women are generally overlooked. So it focuses on women in Britain from the medical profession, in politics, education, law, engineering and the military. And I'm really excited to hopefully learn about some really interesting historical women. I did actually buy myself the next two books in this haul, however, and those are both comic book volumes, the first in series, and I've actually reviewed both of these comics in my mid-month wrap-up for this month, October, so I will link that down below so you can hear my thoughts on them. I enjoyed them both though, and I'll tell you what they are. There's Stock Girl Volume 1, which is all about a famous fashion blogger and social influencer and her terrible allergies and anxieties that she's trying to hide from the world, and her insecurities and all of that jazz, with a sort of dark stalker subplot. We then have Moonstruck. This is the LGBTQ plus comic book of your dreams. It is an incredibly diverse comic book. We have our two main characters are werewolves in a budding relationship between two girls, and there's also centaurs and various other magical creatures, and it's just about them living their lives in the world, which is full of these other magical people. Back to books I was sent by the publishers though. The next one is also illustrated, and that is The Restless Girls by Jessie Burton. Do you just need a moment to take in this beauty? It is such a stunning book, even on the inside. This one is for all ages. It is for children as much as it's for adults. It's published by Bloomsbury Children's. Jessie Burton is probably best known for her kind of adult novels, but this she did in collaboration with Angela Barrett, who is the illustrator, and it's a sort of fairy tale story with gorgeous illustrations, and I am so excited to read this one. Look how stunning that is. It's a modern day fairy tale about the daughters of a king and queen after the queen dies in a car accident, and the father decides to sort of keep his daughters closed away from the rest of the world in order to keep them safe, but one of these daughters decides that she refuses to bend to his will. I actually have one more book with illustrations inside that I thought I'd mention. It's another comic book, and this one I actually borrowed from the library. It's Ms. Marvel Volume 2, so if you saw this month I also uploaded a library haul, or a what I got out of the library video, because I got quite a few books out of the library at one time, which quite a few of were comic books, and I've read most of them now, including Ms. Marvel Volume 1, so I enjoyed that one so much I immediately decided to pick up Ms. Marvel Volume 2. This one is set in New Jersey and it follows our protagonist, who's a young Muslim girl, a teenager, and discovers that she has superhero powers and how to kind of balance her life, her family, and saving the world. We then have the Boneless Mercies by April Genevieve Tucholk. This was sent to me by the publishers and I'm so excited for it. It is a retelling of Beowulf with a female-centric cast of characters. It follows a group of women called the Boneless Mercies who are hired to kind of conduct assassinations, but mercifully. I don't know what the context is for them doing these killings, but they want to go beyond this line of work, and they hear about this monster and decide to seek it out in the hopes of saving the people from it. Again, like I said, inspired by Beowulf, although I don't think you need to have read Beowulf to read this one. It's just meant to be like a wonderful fantasy adventure story with a cast of female leads, so I'm excited to read it. Some more wonderful looking fantasy that I was sent by publishers includes The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. I have seen so much buzz about this book on BookTube since it came out. It's been getting a lot of praise. It's meant to be quite like a dark, intense adult fantasy novel, I think. This one is published by Harper Voyager. This one was actually sent to me by Claire, who has her own BookTube channel and works at HarperCollins, and she said this is one of the best female-led fantasies she has read in quite some time, and I completely trust her opinions. She's a wonderful reviewer with great taste in literature, so if you haven't checked out her channel already, I will link that down below as well. But like I said, I trust her entirely. This one I think is quite a dark, like I said, gritty book about a young woman in a fantasy world that goes off to train at a sort of elite academy for warriors that usually is only attended by the wealthy, whereas she has been sort of striving to get into it despite being from a poor background. Two more fantasy books I was sent by publishers, but these ones are the first and the second in a series. This is The Last Namasara and The Caged Queen by Kristen Ciccarelli, books 1 and 2 in this series. My friend Ailsa was telling me about how much she loved these books, and the second one has just come out, so when I was offered a review copy of this one, I asked if perhaps they had any copies of the first one because I hadn't read that, and again, I very much trust Ailsa's opinion, and luckily for me, they did. Again, I will link Ailsa's channel down below, but these are high fantasy novels published by Galant's Books. It's about a young princess called Asha who is a dragon slayer, but her people hate her, and she spends her time trying to atone for some sort of sin by slaying dragons and taking care of her people. Now, you know I love dragons, and I'm not like in love with books that paint dragons as the baddies, but I'm willing to give these books a chance. I was then sent this lovely little book by Princeton Press, and that's How to Be Free, an Ancient Greek Guide to the Stoic Life. These are selected texts from Epictetus, who was a Stoic philosopher, and they are translated by A.A. Long. This is a wonderful little series that I've recently been sent a few books from by Princeton, which collect together selected text in both the original ancient and language and the translation, to give you sort of access to the ideas of different philosophers and political thinkers from antiquity in the sort of context of like broader modern questions. So like in this one we've got How to Be Free. The Stoic philosophy is actually one of the philosophies I know the least about. I have some knowledge of it. I studied a lot of philosophy and Greek philosophy when I was at university. I wrote a lot of essays and did dedicated courses on Epicureanism and Cynicism, which were both schools of philosophy that existed around the same time as Stoicism, like they came to being around the same time in the Hellenistic period. But out of the three sort of Hellenistic schools of philosophy, Stoicism's the one I know the least about, so it's high time I learn a little bit more. The next book was actually lent to me, and that is Giovannis Room by James Baldwin. This is a novel about two gay men in Paris. I have read some of James Baldwin's non-fiction essays in one of the Penguin mini modern classics, which I really enjoyed, and he is better known perhaps for his fiction, so I really fancied trying some of his fiction, and I was lucky enough to be lent a copy. It's set in the 1950s, and it's sort of like about struggling with coming out and dealing with your feelings and straying from what seems like the safer path, and it just sounds really interesting, really short, again like a modern classic that I've heard amazing things about. A couple of books I picked up for myself second hand though include Etiquette and Espionage by Gail Carragher. This is the first in her Finishing School series, which I think is actually a young adult series. So I read the first two books in her Parasol Protectorate series, which come after these books. You don't have to read the series in order, but they're sort of set in the same world, and the timeline means that these ones are set slightly before the events of the Parasol Protectorate series. But again, like I said, you don't have to read them in order. They are set in Victorian London in a world where vampires and werewolves are known and live amongst people. And in this book we follow our protagonist, a young girl that is sent off to finishing school, but it turns out it's not just for learning to sew and arrange flowers, it's also a finishing school that teaches the arts of assassination and espionage. The other books I read by her were really funny, so I'm really excited to read this one. And I also picked myself up a second-hand copy of another Patricia A. McKillop book, and this is Winter Rose. Look at that cover. This is just my dream book. It is so beautiful. The cover goes off onto the back there as well. Lovely tiny little hardback. I'm just in love with everything going on here. All I know about this one is that it is a retelling of the Tam Lin folktale. This doesn't actually have a blurb on it as much as I love the cover, so I mainly picked it up because I knew I loved Patricia A. McKillip, but I also love a good folktale retelling, and I also know I love Patricia A. McKillip's writing. The last book I was sent by publisher this month is actually one that came in a very special parcel. This was sent to me by Hotkey Books, and I just want to say how awesome this is. I love this. It's just a proof copy inside this box, but I am keeping this box and using it, and it just came like this and looks lovely. So it is a proof copy of The Twisted Tree by Rachel Burge, but this one is described as part ghost story, part Nordic thriller. What more could you want? I wasn't expecting this book, but I am very, very pleased to be sent it because it sounds fantastic. This is about a young girl who discovers that she has an ability to read objects and learn about the people that own those objects, and it started when she had an accident in her grandmother's house when she was younger. So she is on her way to seek out more knowledge from her grandmother, hopefully, but instead discovers that her grandmother is dead and there's a strange young man living in her house. Spooky. But last, but certainly not least, let's round things off by returning to an old favourite, or a new favourite, and that's Juliet Marilli. This I actually bought myself new. It is the sequel to Shadowfell. This is a trilogy by Juliet Marilli, which falls more into the young adult category than her other books. So the other series I love by her is Seven Waters series, and the Blackthorn and Grimm books as well are for adults, but this is more of her young adult series, which just makes it a bit more fast paced, I think, is like the main difference. And I really enjoyed the first of the series. It was just like, again, like I said, like a sort of fast paced, fun fantasy novel set in a medieval type Scotland full of fairies and evil kings. So I have been wanting to read the sequel to that, and a few people have mentioned that the second book is even better than the first book in the comments of my other videos, so I sort of felt compelled to treat myself to this one. But those are all the books I have recently acquired. I would love to hear from you if you have any thoughts on any of the books I've mentioned in this video, whether you have read them or are interested in reading them. Which ones do you think I should pick up first and review? But until next time, happy reading, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye guys!